Yeah, I think got like 1 to 2 million views on LinkedIn, which is pretty high like view count. The video went viral. We got a lot of people trying it out. Overnight, we went from, 0 users, 0 customers. No one had ever paid us anything before to having like 100 paid users on pretty cheap, like $50 a month subscriptions. Almost all of our growth is purely inbound. Word of mouth is by far our biggest channel. Over half of our signups come from word of mouth. We get over 500 free user signups a day. Nowadays, we do other things as well. So it's diversified a bit, but I'd say like up to the 10 million ARR mark, it was very driven by PLG and then kind of sales assisted upsell for our larger customers. Especially in the early days in 2024, it was really like marginally better. It was already a big unlock because it meant that this new workflow gave a better output than the existing workflow. And the new workflow has not even been optimized yet. The 10x better always has to be caveated with like how important is the thing that's being worked on. And if it's a really important thing, then 2x better is a huge outcome for the end user, let alone 10x.
And you've grown what, like 3x this year?
This year, closer to 10x.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've crossed 10 million top line.
Oh, yeah. We announced, so 10 million we announced as part of our Series A announcement.
That's an insane year.
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit. Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Do you think the Product Market Fit show has product market fit? Because if you do, then there's something you just have to do. You have to take out your phone. You have to leave the show 5 stars. It lets us reach more founders and it lets us get better guests. Thank you.
David, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Dude, I'm hyped up, man. I'm hyped up. I'm ready to make this happen. You started I wouldn't say long ago at all, right? But like 2020, 2021, and seems to really have hit like an inflection point over the last, you'll tell me, but let's say a year or two. You just closed $30 million Series A by probably the most historic, let's say, firm in the world by Sequoia. Just this summer, was announced in September. So it looks from the outside like things are off to the races. But excited to hear what it's really like inside.
Yeah, excited to chat. As you hinted at, it took a while for things to work.
Let's start at the beginning, man. Maybe just like, what does Juicebox do?
For sure. So Juicebox is an AI recruiting platform. Really what we do is help companies find the very best talent for their teams. And we do that using natural language search. So you can just describe who you're looking for using a short prompt, and then you'll start seeing top matches for the role. From there, we help you reach out to them, manage those contacts and more. So kind of all-in-one, top of funnel for recruiting.
Is it kind of like the next level of you think of like LinkedIn recruiting is kind of like a core outbound piece? Is it like just the AI version of that?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
And when did you start this business?
We started the company in 2022, and then we pivoted into the current shape of the business in mid-2023.
Okay, but you incorporated 2022.
That's right.
Okay, cool. So maybe walk us through, give us a little bit of your background, and then let's go deeper on like kind of the post-COVID, like what were you doing from 2020 till 2022, just because that time before is always really relevant.
For sure. So I'm originally from Germany. I grew up there. I came to the US for college, studied econ, but almost immediately fell into tech. I did a couple internships in companies and also on the venture side. And then I spent a year during COVID, which I took off from college, working at Snap. And so initially as an intern, was there for 3 months at first, and then ended up staying for almost a year. And it was a really fun experience. I learned a ton. And I also got to know my co-founder during that time.
What year was that you were at Snap?
Mid-2020 through mid-2021. And so college had I think COVID started breaking out in March or something. And then by summer, I was interning at Snap. And then I ended up just continuing that for a full year.
Snap is one of those companies, obviously everybody knows about it, but I just wonder, what's it like inside of Snap? On the one hand, such a well-known, well-used product by a certain segment of the population. And then you got the big behemoth, obviously, that's just constantly pounding on you. And then TikTok kind of being a newcomer that really, really, truly took off. I'm just curious, what's it like? First of all, what's the culture like at Snap? And then second of all, inside when you're there, what is the perspective of kind of that competitive dynamic?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was on the international growth team, which basically meant we were focused on what growth can we drive in international markets. And that growth was primarily focused on usage or user growth rather than revenue growth. And so Snap actually makes a decent amount of revenue, I think more than one would maybe assume. And a lot of that is advertising driven by the US and then a bit less the European markets. And, the goal of the team was to show that same usage growth internationally so that in the future, those could also be viable markets. And so we thought a lot about like, what is the competitive positioning? How does that change from market to market? What do people actually use? And what Snap does incredibly well is they kind of capture this segment of the audience, which is like 13 to say 25-year-olds, and almost everyone in certain markets is a daily active user. But then I think it's a little bit less clear what users do beyond that as they grow older and maybe don't use the product as much or kind of migrate off to different platforms. And I think that was something we thought a lot about while I was there, and also something that maybe is still unsolved.
Yeah, we had one of the early investors on the PMF show and, talking about, so many innovations that came out of Snap, obviously disappearing messages, but even like stories and just ordering things in chronological order, like flip chronological order, right? Like just there's so many kind of things that they started that now obviously many others are doing. So they're a very kind of product forward company. So maybe tell me like what happens after Snap?
Yeah, so while at Snap, I was kind of helping organize this competition with a few friends from college. And the competition was designed for high school seniors. And so it allowed everyone to submit a research paper really with a technical focus. And it was COVID themed because everything was COVID themed at the time. And so it was about social distancing.
It's like 2021?
Yeah, exactly. 2021, or it was late 2020. And so on social distancing, and the prize was you got to meet Stephen Wolfram. And so I had helped organize this competition, and we had ended up having a good number of students participate, like I think in the around 10,000 or so, in roughly that range. And one of them was Ashan, who ended up winning the competition. And I got to know him through that. And he actually ended up becoming now my co-founder. And so at the time, we just got to know each other. We were working on a couple of projects with a few other people as well. And they were really just startup-esque ideas. And so...
But you're still at Snap at this point?
Yeah, this was kind of as I was wrapping up my time at Snap and kind of thinking about, either going back to school or maybe not doing that. We started working on different projects. And so one of them was a audio sharing app. You could think of it as like short form Clubhouse. Everyone was using Clubhouse at the time. There was these like long form content sessions. People would be on Clubhouse for like 3 hours, really deep discussions. I think Mark Andreessen was on there like every day. And at the same time, TikTok was also blowing up. And so we thought, okay, what if we combine, short form content and the virality of that with the audio only format, since that seems to be something that was taking off. And we kind of built a product around that mobile app, and that did not really work. And so I think the biggest learning from that was that the reason that short form content works on TikTok is because it's very stimulating. It has like a visual, it has an audio piece. You can even like look at the comments, and then there's like the extreme version of that nowadays where maybe you've seen them where people play like a video game in one half of the screen, and then the other half of the screen is like the content, and then there's also audio on top, and it's like there's so many things happening. And so in a way, audio content is the opposite of that, where by definition, there's going to be a lot less things happening. And so I think it lends itself to these longer form content pieces instead, where like ideas are developed more thoroughly. And maybe that's what Clubhouse was tapping into as well, that we never managed to.
I think it's also the context, right? Like it's this kind of that lean back, lean forward kind of thing, right? Like maybe in this context, it's less lean back, lean forward, and kind of like, with podcasts, I think a lot of times you're doing something else. Maybe you're driving, you're walking, you're cooking, it's kind of in the background, you're tuned in, but you don't need to be like 100%. Whereas with even something like short form, yeah, it's lean back, but you're watching the thing, like you're on the thing, and you need to be constantly like, if it's not interesting right now, you flick it. Whereas if it's not interesting on a podcast, you maybe just tune out for 5 minutes, and you tune back in. And so I wonder if that also plays a role. Like you said, like for short form, the stimulation level needs to be so high, because otherwise you won't just go to the next clip. Like at some point you just get out of the app, do something else.
It's a good point. It's like if you're visually looking at the app, it needs to capture your full attention versus, as you pointed out on like a podcast, it doesn't necessarily need to capture your full attention, just enough to keep your audio attention, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah, and so that was our experience there. It was fun to build, but it was also kind of rough because it never, we got like a few hundred users on there, but no one was like retentive. And I guess all like the classic initial failed college social media startup idea. And the best thing about it, though, was that Ashan and I really enjoyed working together. And so we gave it another shot shortly thereafter with a music-focused app. And so similar concept, still short form, but in this case, you could connect with your Spotify and then get personalized music recommendations. And there was a social element to it as well of like sharing different song snippets. And that idea worked better. We got 50,000 users on there pretty quickly. We had some like TikTok virality of people posting about us and more. And it was kind of the first feeling of like, oh, this is a product that people actually want to use. And this is something that could work. And still very much from a perspective of thinking of, we want to build a fun product.
This was before like Spotify Discover or whatever. Like they were doing less, I think, with playlists then.
Yeah, so Spotify had some like playlists, but nowadays they actually have like a very similar thing to what we were building at the time of like just swiping through short form audio snippets. And we were like heavily dependent on like Spotify's API. So like without that, we couldn't have built the product. It's how we got the short form snippets of the songs, etc. Which is also why it would have never been like a long-term business. But it was a fun product to build and get a lot of users on and see people just sharing songs with each other. And I had been back at college at this point. So I was supposed to have 2 years left. I ended up accelerating. So I only did one. And at the same time, we were working on the product. And that product was already called Juicebox, which is the same name as the recruiting company today, because it was a wordplay on Jukebox. And so if you look up Juicebox on the App Store, you might find Juicebox, the music app for music discovery. So that was kind of the second thing that we built together. And then ultimately what gave us the conviction to go all in and start building Juicebox full-time in summer of 2022 when we also got into YC.
Yeah, at that point, what stage was the product? Like where were you at when you got into YC?
Yeah, when we applied to YC, we had like built the music app, but we knew we didn't want to continue working on that. And so our written application was very heavily about the music app. But by the time we got to the interview stage, we were like, hey, we wrote a lot about the music app thing, but we're not sure if this is going to work. And so we had like a few other ideas as well. And that was largely around the recruiting space, but like no real product or no traction.
But you pitched that because I know like the interviews in YC, like they're very short because it's high volume. So if you don't have something crisp, like I don't know how you make it in sort of thing.
Yep. So we had something crisp on music, or we had like an idea around it, but we also knew if we got that question, they like sometimes ask the question, oh, do you have other ideas? Or are you thinking about doing something else? Basically when they're skeptical about what you're pitching.
Right.
We also knew we were not married to that idea. And we indicated that in the interview too, that like, we're open to exploring something else. And so that ended up being important because we did that basically right away. And, we decided, hey, the music thing is probably not going to work. And so let's start fresh and see where we can find something that we really believe in.
Why do you think, maybe this is a better question for YC, but why do you think you got in? I mean, so many people tried to get into YC and I'm sure they come up with like, very specific pitch, specific market, like all this stuff, like I'm all in. You seem to, I don't know, you were casual about it. You got something that was working, but you're also like, but I might do these other things. And yet they saw something in you and wanted you in the program. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think we showed that we could execute. Like the product had real usage on it. Like it had over 50,000 users. That's like not that easy to get.
Yeah, it's true.
And it had some virality to it as well. Like we built something that clearly worked. And then I think the other thing that stood out is that Ishan and I had built two things together at this point, and both of them didn't really work, but we still wanted to continue building and do something. And so I think that co-founder dynamic was also really important. Yeah, so I'd sum it up as like the combination of, we built something that worked. We knew we were capable of building something that would work. And then two, us as co-founders did that together. And so I think that was kind of the bet on why we might be able to succeed in YC.
How quickly into YC do you decide that you don't want to go down this music app idea?
Before it started, like literally like maybe a week or two after we got in. So it was super quick. We were even embarrassed. We were like, oh, how do we approach this with our YC partner? They're gonna...
As though they hadn't seen that a million times by that point, right?
We were like really worked up about it. In reality, like I don't even know if he remembers this, but like, we were like very, very worked up about it.
What was the key catalyst to making that? It's not an easy decision. You have 50,000 users, like things are kind of working. A lot of people would just say, let's just try to get to 100. Let's just hustle or whatever, like what was the catalyst for you guys to decide, no, you know what, this is not the thing?
Yeah, so two things. One, retention numbers. And so that was like the easiest metric to look at is that, and I had seen what those metrics looked like at Snap and that they were phenomenal there. And then I saw what they looked like for us, and like our day 30 user retention was catastrophic. Like people would not come back, not even after 7 days, let alone 30 days. And the only thing that was growing for us was the top of funnel. And so we had net new users downloading the music app because it was, I think, like catchy and had some virality to it, but it didn't have a habit. It didn't have something that people would be coming back to every day. And so the number of retentive users was just very low.
I talk about this in many different vectors, like when it comes to team, I would say especially, but in your case, in terms of metrics and retention specifically, it's interesting how important it is to have seen what excellence looks like. Obviously, you can look up benchmarks and you could see some of this stuff, but I find unless you've been there and experienced it, you might maybe not believe it or maybe fall into like, oh, this is the average, so we're doing better than average. But when you see what true greatness is, it's kind of hard to settle for anything much lower than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way of describing it. Even today, like with today's product, we have this, revenue analytics platform that we use, and they actually benchmark, here's like what 10th percentile growth looks like, 90th percentile growth, and then they plot that all on a chart, and then they put our revenue number on that chart as well. And so it's actually very interesting to see like what does best in class mean and where do we stand on that.
How does recruiting come into the picture?
Yeah. So, we were doing YC. We knew we needed to find something new. A lot of other people in the batch at this point were also pivoting. We're like, a few weeks into the batch, basically, you start seeing the first other companies switching ideas. And so we started seeing other companies do this very quickly, like within 2 days or something, they had a new idea and they were going for it. And we struggled to do that. Like it ended up taking us multiple months to figure out what idea we wanted to double down on. And in fact, more than that, like 5 or 6 months total. And
So that's post YC at that point.
yeah, during YC and post YC. So we had like iterations on the idea of recruiting. We knew we wanted to solve something in recruiting from the employer perspective, or at least monetize that way. And we wanted to go after a big problem, but we didn't exactly know what that meant. And so, we had this overarching thesis that there's an opportunity to do better matching between opportunities and people working in those opportunities, but we didn't know what that exactly would look like as a product.
Where did that come from? Like, I mean, for you to spend 5 months trying to figure things out means there was some pretty powerful driver to take you that way. Once you say no to music, I mean, you could do anything, right? Right? It's like the world is your oyster, right? So you decide to go down recruiting and you take a few months to figure out this is going to be the thing. What is pulling you that direction to begin with? Was it a personal experience? Was it something else you were seeing?
So both my co-founder Ishan and I had worked essentially all throughout college, or in his case, even high school. And all the opportunities we had were ones that we cold outbounded ourselves. And like we created those opportunities. And so as an example, the work I did at Snap, that came from a college consulting group case that we did for them, and then was able to convert that into first an internship and then staying there long term. I also did some part-time work at different VC firms during that time, also from me just cold outbounding, trying to create opportunities for myself. And it was very high friction. Like 99% of those emails, never got a response or never led to anything. But it was possible to create those opportunities, and there was a real need for the company that was being fulfilled too. And so if the kind of a way of creating jobs or opportunities was that high friction or requires that much effort, then clearly something's not going well in the labor market overall, or there's something missing if that's the best way of finding an opportunity. And so that was the overarching like thesis that we both had and we believed quite strongly. And it was also one that like personally resonated with us, where, most B2B software kind of requires having worked in a role where that pain point was felt or experienced. But we felt we experienced it from the candidate's perspective, and we knew there was something that we could build.
There's been a lot, and I'm sure when you started to talk, especially within YC, and there's people there that know like, every startup that tried anything. But when you think about recruiting, there's been a lot of companies that have tried to solve that problem. I mean, LinkedIn is, the big one that is solving that problem. Obviously built a huge business around just candidate profiles and ultimately recruiting. But I remember like hired.com, was really hot till it wasn't. There was a bunch. What were some of the things, like take me deep in that 5-month journey? Because finding the right problem and solution is a huge piece of ultimately getting to product market fit. So you had the problem. It was a problem that many others before you had seen. What are some of the key moments in that 5-month journey that make you decide where to end up and how to really solve it?
Yeah, there was 2 key learnings we had in that 5-month journey, and both of them were really heavily influenced by the recruiters we actually got to know during that time. And so the first learning we had to get to was profile search or profile review, basically something where it involves looking at a profile, be that a LinkedIn profile, a resume, or any other type of visual version of a profile, is a very substantial percentage of recruiter time. Let's ballpark it at like half of recruiter time. And that really came from just spending time shadowing recruiters on like literal Zoom calls. And so we would just see what people would be doing, and they generously like kind of walk us through their workflows. And we'd see the amount of time spent on some type of profile review. It was clear that that was such a core part of the job, but it was also not clear what a solution to that could look like. And LinkedIn has like a really big ML team, and they've done a ton on like search ranking, and all of that kind of goes back to that idea of the search problem. Like, can you surface the right person at the right time? And then the second kind of big learning or big thing that happened, and this was really just by coincidence of timing, is that ChatGPT launched in October 2022. And so suddenly we had this kind of form of intelligence, and alongside it, the GPT 3.5 API launched as well. And so we had this kind of intelligence available by API, which could actually solve that profile review or profile search problem. Because if broken down, into small enough steps, we could look at the different things that one assesses for in their head. So like, let's say there's 5 different criteria we're looking for a given role, and we kind of mentally assess a profile against those. We could just have an LLM do the same thing. Even when like viewed on an individual profile basis, it might be perceived as assessment, versus if you do that at really large scale, that's actually search. By reviewing tens of thousands of profiles, you're searching through those profiles. And so that was the big technology unlock we had at the time. By like November 2022, it was clear to us, okay, we can bring those two things together, and we started iterating on what that product could look like. And so that was like the main learning journey for us, or what got us to that point.
I know you had this like one insane like viral post that you made in the very early days on LinkedIn. I think got like 7,000 likes or something like that. I'm not sure how many views. You can tell me. Maybe tell me more about that. And like, was that kind of the first product that you put out?
Yeah, so we launched then in May 2023, People GPT by Juicebox. Name very much chosen to try to drive some virality at the time, because everyone was familiar with ChatGPT. The concept of LLMs was still pretty new to most people, or like kind of average person has probably not heard of them, but a lot of people had heard of ChatGPT at the time. And so we launched People GPT. It was a 90-second video on LinkedIn.
When was this, by the way?
May 2023.
Okay, so it wasn't like right after, like 6 months after, but still very much in that early wave.
It took us a while to get there and to build, because by the time we launched that, we actually had like a self-serve version live. So you could actually use the product and you could pay for it. And so in that 90-second video, we just kind of walked through what the product did. And at the time, it was pretty simple. It let you do an initial search. So you could kind of describe what candidate you were looking for. It would return a list of profiles. And then it had this chat interface to ask questions about them, or kind of go in more depth on your search. And the video did very well, because I think it kind of captured what people in our customer audience, which was recruiters, or maybe even like people hiring more broadly, were looking for, of, bringing that innovation of like AI or LLMs into the recruiting sector. And so that was like the broad message market fit that we had.
How many views did it get? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think like 1 to 2 million views on LinkedIn, which is pretty high like view count for a piece of content there. And it had like fairly large engagement. And you mentioned like the roughly 7,000 likes.
And it wasn't, by the way, like I was expecting when I watched it, like a Cluely type, like hype marketing video, stuff you see these days. I mean, it wasn't that common back then. And this was not that. It was very much like a classic, here's my product, here's the demo, like here's what it does. And yet clearly there was something that resonated, because like you said, it totally took off.
Yeah, it was literally like a Loom recording. The editing that I think we did well is that it was very fast paced. So like pretty quickly you could kind of see what the flow was. But yeah, it was not very sophisticated at all, filmed in a WeWork with Loom. And so the video went viral. We got a lot of people trying it out. I think overnight we went from 0 users, 0 customers. No one had ever paid us anything before, to having like 100 paid users on pretty cheap, like $50 a month subscriptions.
When you put it out, did you have expectations? What did you think would happen?
So for us, like we were like, okay, if this goes well, we'll get like 5 paid users from this. We're going to product feedback and we'll continue to improve. And so that was kind of I think our benchmark. Obviously we were hoping for the best, and we ended up getting a lot more usage than we expected. And I think that was really big too, because it meant like we had momentum. We were convinced we were going the right direction.
Right.
And so that was kind of the success moment. And then it kind of continued for like 10 days or so afterwards, where there was still new people finding out about it, and the virality kind of continued there. But then like shortly thereafter, we kind of started realizing, hey, these people are all churning, or we're not really solving their problems. Like we're not actually helping them find net new candidates, or only in like very rare cases was it successful. And that was good feedback, but we also really just took it as such. Like this was feedback for us. We felt like we had validated the message market fit, or like there was something that we could build here, or something where we should continue building, and there will be people who are interested in trying it out. Now we have to figure out that the product actually does what we say it does, to a sufficiently high level of quality that people want to continue using it.
So I understand high level, like, recruiters, whether they're out of, in-house or like, offshore or outsourced recruiters, I should say, they spend a lot of time looking for candidates, trying to fill roles. That makes sense. Analyzing resumes to whether they fit certain roles and going outbound, like that totally makes sense. I guess my question is, there are platforms to do that stuff. There is LinkedIn Recruiter being like the main thing that probably everybody has in their tool set. What was it about what you even were pitching then, like about your message, that still drew people, versus them saying something like, I could do that over here as well? Maybe not as slick, but like, what's really the difference? Like, what was it that you were selling specifically at that point that seemed to resonate so much?
Yeah, I think it was the notion, and this is still true to today, that the majority of recruiting software is really dependent on two things. One, the recruiter actually using the software, and then two, the software itself. And so oftentimes the software itself is built in a way that it's like safe and comprehensive. Like you can just click through profile by profile and like, nothing can really go wrong, but also nothing can really go right. Like there's no real value add from the software. And when we built Juicebox, the concept was, hey, we're actually going to try to save some of the time that the recruiter spends using the software on top of providing the actual software. And so our goal was always kind of do the work for the user rather than provide a platform for the user to do the work, if that makes sense.
And is that do the work means what? Like setting filters? Like you type in natural language, it sets filters for you? Is that the main unlock? I know it's evolved, I'm sure, a lot then, but I'm just talking about at the beginning.
Yep. Yeah. Setting filters was V1. But then two, once you've set the filters, your hit rate is probably still only at best like 20 to 30% of filtered profiles match who you're looking for. And so then the actual work is going through all of those profiles and saying, is this someone that we would actually want to speak to in an interview? And oftentimes there's a lot of different reasons to object from, like, oh, they didn't work at a company previously that we would target hiring from, or they have some skill matches, but not all of them, a lot of different objections that can exist. And so what Juicebox did is it kind of did that work of reviewing and getting down to the 20 to 30% hit rate for you. It ideally would present those 20 to 30% matching profiles and give the justification of why those 20 to 30% are the right ones to reach out to. And that was really where the majority of time savings comes from too.
So at this point, you have kind of what you call, message market fit, but you have crazy churn. What's the next step?
Yeah. So next step was like really making the product work. There were some like inherent limitations we had because of also cost. Like it cost us a lot of money to serve the profiles. Each user could only access, I think in the beginning, 50 profiles per month, which is like a ridiculously low number for a recruiter who probably reviews like thousands of profiles in a given quarter.
This is because your token costs were so expensive, or
Token cost was one, but then the actual, like, we paid different data partners money for every profile that we showed, and like we just couldn't afford to show more than we were at the time. And so we fixed that. We got to a point where we could like license the data at larger scale and host a lot of that data ourselves instead, which was a big unlock and meant that we could allow users to search as much as they wanted to. And that took us a while. So like over the next 6 months, we were just working on that, trying to get the platform to a usable state. I think revenue at that point was like 200K in ARR or so, but it was like this very like churny 200K in ARR, and it was basically flat, like maybe growing a tiny bit here or there, but no meaningful changes. And that carried all the way through to like January 2024, which is when the product started getting good. And so for that 6-month period, we were just working, making it better. And it was still just Sean and me.
And you were funded, like how much did you raise at that point?
We have tens of thousands of people who have followed the show. Are you one of those people? You want to be a part of the group. You want to be a part of those tens of thousands of followers. So hit the follow button.
We had raised $1 million at that point. So 500K is part of our YC round and 500K after YC.
Who's part of the team?
Just Sean, my co-founder, and me. So just two of us. Yeah, and that was really good because we were very fast on our iteration cycles and we only focused on what mattered. And so I think we had that like forced focus by only being two people.
Is this something that, like, I've seen it in many YC founders that they keep the team like very, very small. I'm a huge fan of it, but I'm curious now that you say this, like, is this something that's reinforced internally by YC, or is it just complete coincidence? Because you had $1 million. I mean, you could have been, I don't know, 6 people if you wanted to.
Yeah, so I think YC does say like, oh, only hire when it makes sense or like when you know what they'll be doing. So they kind of, I guess, softly discourage hiring before the company is sure about it. But yeah, we definitely took that to the extreme. I think part of the reason was we felt we couldn't attract the type of talent that we wanted to hire because we were so early, risky, unproven. And so I think that was a big influence as well.
I think if I don't remember, Ashby, like Ben was on the show, and I think he was similar. Like he was like 3 people for like the longest time, just the co-founders, just building till they got the thing. And it's to me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, when you're in it, you always feel like, oh, if you just had more people, you could move faster. But then you realize until you know which direction, like you're gonna do more stuff, but it's not gonna actually get you closer to product market fit in the vast majority of cases. The co-founders, they think differently, they're invested differently, they're complete self-starters, and it's hard to get that from employees unless you have a direction of like where you really need to go.
Yep. Yeah. And I think a lot of that also comes from decision making where like as co-founders, like the decision is made together. So both people are automatically bought into it versus when there's a team, like unless they're also co-founders, like the team is not going to be making the decision or have the same influence on the decision. And so it can be a lot harder to get them bought into what the direction should be, especially if that's changing frequently in the early days.
What happens in those 6 months where, like you said, in January 2024, things finally start to click? Like, what were some of the key things that made the product really click?
We were still purely focused on search. So our only focus was like, how good can we get the search? And is this something that a recruiter would prefer to use over what they've been using so far day to day? And so that was our like only North Star. We were just looking at, how many searches were people running and were they finding the right people? In fact, we got so extreme with it that we had like an internal Slack bot that pinged us every time a user ran a search. And then we would manually go and recreate that search. And at some point that became like 100 searches a day that we would go and manually recreate and then assess whether we serve the right profiles for that search or what we could be doing better.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How do you measure the right profile? So you were doing that qualitatively yourself, like literally looking through and be like, yeah, I think we did well here, or I didn't, or I don't, whatever.
And many times it would kind of be obvious what went wrong. Like we would instantly know, okay, here's like the next error point. Like we added it to our list of things to fix, and then we would go and fix them. And because search is so broad, there's such a long tail of things that can go wrong. And really the only way of fixing them is like methodologically going through every single one of them and fixing. And that takes time. It's also like not fun work, but it was necessary. I think we did a good job of executing that step by step. And at some point it kind of crossed the threshold of like, this is actually really adding value from our workflow. This is a better search than I would get otherwise, at least for some users. And we got that to that point in early 2024 where people started sticking with the platform and were actually using it as one of their primary ways of finding candidates. And then we started seeing that be reflected in our customer and revenue growth as well. And I think the biggest thing that actually changed was not the net volume of like net new signups, it was the retention of those users. And so we started growing.
Do you remember like the retention? Now I'm going to take you back, but what the retention might have been, in those first 6 months, and then how good it got in, let's say, the first 6 months of 2024, like over that 12-month period? What was the change in retention?
Yeah, so our net revenue retention month on month, I think was in the beginning, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'd ballpark it at like 70 to 80% month on month, which is pretty brutal. It means like a significant share of users are churning out every month.
Like you're churning 20% of your revenue each month.
That's right. We were roughly adding the same thing back. So like overall revenue stayed the same for that 7-month period. And then that started changing in 2024. That net revenue retention number month on month started hitting 100%. And then at some point it started crossing that threshold and going significantly above that.
Because your customers they're adding more and more seats. Is that the way you charge, or doing more searches?
Exactly. And so the expansions were always important to us because it showed that like it kind of rolled out to a team. But then nowadays with like a larger customer base, we take a few different like slices of that data and focus on, which segments are we winning the most on and like where can we still be doing the most work.
But originally it was kind of like product-led growth, right? People were just kind of adopting it, signing up, using it.
Yeah, to this day. So almost all of our growth is purely inbound from word of mouth is by far our biggest channel. Over half of our signups come from word of mouth. We get over 500 free user signups a day. And nowadays we do other things as well. Like we do paid ads. We just started building an outbound team. And so it's diversified a bit, but I'd say like up to the 10 million ARR mark, it was very driven by PLG and then kind of sales assisted upsell for our larger customers.
Talk to me a bit more about like quantitatively just how much better you were, right? So for example, by the time, let's call it Q1 2024, when things are starting to hit and your net revenue retention is kind of over 100%, so people are liking it. When you think about the before and the after, right? So before they're doing searches on LinkedIn Recruiter, a million different other tools, whatever. Then they're doing searches on Juicebox. What are we talking about? Are you talking about half the time, a tenth of the time, 10% better searches? Like how much better were we talking about then?
Yeah, so the initial like way we'd measure was, one, it was like very anecdotal, like just from what people would tell us of like the time saved. And there was two things people would tell us. One, like, oh, I found these candidates that I'd never seen before and I've been doing this search for X amount of time. So maybe I've been doing that search for weeks and I've never found these certain people. And that was because our search just worked differently than how traditional search worked. And that's very valuable because if you end up hiring one of those people, that adds a ton of value to the business. And then the second thing is just general time saved. So let's say I used to spend 15 hours a week searching through profiles. Now I spend 5 hours doing the same thing. And so that's also somewhat quantifiable. but there's actually pretty large variance based on who the customer is and how they describe it. And so even to this day, like it's hard for me to say exactly how many hours we will save for a given recruiter because so much depends on their workflow and what they were doing previously and how efficient they were with things before. But yeah, those are kind of two things that we immediately realized as a good case for ROI.
It's interesting, right? Because we talk a lot about kind of you have to be 10x better and all these sort of things. And, so much of this stuff, so much of like the cliche advice depends on the go-to-market. Like in your case, because it's PLG, the user is the buyer, at least that's my understanding, or at least at first, right? And so any sort of delta in product quality, they'll feel immediately. It's not like they have to, convince somebody higher than them that this is delivering XYZ ROI. It's kind of like, maybe it's a stupid example, but take Slack versus email. Like, how much time do you save or did you save, especially when Slack started? Questionable, but you certainly enjoyed it more and you thought it was better and and all of a sudden you were paying for it. And so this falls, I would think, a little bit into that camp where if I'm the recruiter, like I'm spending a lot of my time on these tools, if Juicebox works a little bit better, then that's worth it. Like that's just worth it to me and I don't need to over quantify, what that means. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think especially in that early days in 2024, like it was really like even just a little marginally better was already a big unlock because it meant that this new workflow gave a better output than the existing workflow, and the new workflow has not even been optimized yet. And so the 10x better always has to be caveated with like how important is the thing that's being worked on. And if it's a really important thing, then 2x better is a huge outcome for the end user, let alone 10x.
It's true. This is their core job. I mean, a recruiter literally hunts for talent and you're going to help them do their job marginally better. There is a point at which it becomes like, how can I afford not to be 10% better than everybody else, or at least now as good as everybody else because they're doing this thing. So that makes sense. Walk me through another thing that I really want to understand, which is you mentioned you, in some cases, were giving results others weren't. Can you walk me through, like, it's not immediately clear to me why that would be or how that would happen. Like, can you walk me through an example of, you mentioned your search works differently. So what's happening and what might you surface that others would miss?
Yeah. So as an example, let's say we want like a pretty basic software engineer who's worked in fintech. And a traditional way to set up that search is kind of one of two ways. Either you look for job title software engineer and then keyword on profile fintech. And so it's going to pull everyone who has mentioned fintech somewhere on their profile and as the job title software engineer. And that, of course, limits you to people who actually have the word fintech on their profile. And so then the second approach to doing that is, the same method, but then also adding a bunch of company names that we know work in fintech. And so we might go research, like, what are the top 100 fintech companies? And we'll say either anyone who has the word fintech or who's worked at one of those 100 fintech companies. That second approach already takes a good amount of time, like researching those 100 fintech companies. But even more importantly, it's not comprehensive. And so what Juicebox does is it'll take the software engineer, and then we'll actually go through and review every single person or every single company to see in a comprehensive way, does this match fintech? And that could be just purely based on like a website describing what the company does, or even a description of, let's say someone working at a payroll company, but who focuses on actually processing the payroll, probably overlaps pretty closely with what we might be looking for in fintech. And so because Juicebox uses a pure LLM for that, we're able to kind of make a suggestion of this person probably matches what you're looking for, even if they never mention the word fintech or one of those top 100 fintech.
Or even if their industry, because you have industries as well on LinkedIn, but maybe their industry is not like fintech or finance or anything related to that, but it'll still figure it out.
Exactly. And so the reason that's like particularly important is because recruiting is so competitive. It's a zero-sum game. Only one company is going to hire the right person. And so if you have an edge or a way of finding additional profiles that a different recruiting team does not, that means you're going to be winning those candidates against them because they don't even know they exist.
One of the things that's I think really interesting is you're taking, and it's common to LLMs, but like old way of searching is really keyword based. So you either have the keyword somewhere or you don't. Like either you have it or maybe the company that you work at has it in their about page. Like somewhere you've got to have that fintech keyword or something, like some way of connecting that this is fintech, because there is no true like semantic understanding of any of these things. There's just what's there on the page. Whereas with an LLM, similar to a human, you can read a profile and you can think about it a little bit and say, you know what, actually, like, yeah, this is actually fintech related and here's why. And you see LLMs do this type of thing all the time. And so you're taking a process that is manual, that has to do with like, let's say natural language understanding, whatever you want to call it. And obviously with LLMs, you can do it at scale. And that gives you this unlock of matching capability that just can't be done if you're limited to the words on the page.
That's exactly right. And it's also exactly what like a human is actually pretty good at, but like a traditional search system is really bad at, which is like looking at a profile and making a reasonable judgment, like, does this actually match the search query? And because we can just brute force an LLM to do this at like scale of hundreds of thousands of profiles, we can suddenly use like human level judgment against profiles at a scale that was just not possible previously.
Who is mainly using you? Is it in-house recruiters or like recruiting firms equal?
So in the beginning, because we worked best with, we were just getting started, like it was easier for us to enter a small talent team. Often that was like startup talent teams, like in-house recruiters or small recruiting agencies. Nowadays, we have over 4,000 customers, 60% are in-house, 40% are agencies. And that ranges from like Fortune 500 companies with 100-person recruiting teams all the way to startup founders doing their first hire.
So your ACVs are kind of all over the place.
Yes.
So tell me about, what does the rest of the year 2024 look like in terms of product and in terms of growth?
Yeah, so we kept on growing very consistently, 20 to 30% every month. We started working with one of the large AI labs in summer of 2024. I think it's one of the best examples of, they're in a very intense competition for talent, and it matters a lot who finds a given profile that another competing company might not. And so we started working with a small team there. It was just 10 recruiters using us in the beginning. They were kind of testing it out. And they were, looking at every tool in that market. And so it was also a very competitive process, which we ended up winning. And so that was a really good signal for us too, that we were, continuing to build in the right direction. And we started winning more customers around that time as well, and starting to work with teams too. Teams opened up kind of a new problem set for us. As in the beginning, we were just solving for the pure search. Now we had to solve for the search in the context of many other people at the same company also running the same search. And so at what point should one serve the same results versus when should results be different? How does one hide views or activities that other people on the team have done and more? And so we started solving for that problem landscape as well, while also solving for the deeper workflow. So everything from managing those contacts to engaging them, reaching out, and more. And we made our first hire on the team. Our founding engineer, Minju, joined us in summer of 2024.
What revenue were you at when you made the first hire?
We were close to $1 million. I think we were at like 700K or so, but growing pretty quickly. So like, I think maybe within 2 months or so of him joining, we hit the $1 million.
And this was mid 24?
That's right.
So call it a year and a bit ago. How many people now on the team?
24.
So you kept the team like relatively lean. I mean, again, like you've raised more millions than you have employees. I don't know if that's a KPI, but
yeah, and our revenue per employee is still very high too, which I think is a good like metric on team scaling.
Let's go deeper on go to market. I mean, at this point, you've got a product. It's generally working. You're expanding the product features as you normally would. Inbound is a funny thing. Like, it is great in one sense because you don't have to do anything, but it also has potential downside, not always, but a potential downside, which is it's just not as controllable, right? Like outbound, if you told me, we went outbound, I'd be like, okay, so you probably you just hire more SDRs, you find a way to get more leads, you get more AAs, you just scale the outbound team, you scale the top line, boom. With inbound, the worry is, whatever flow you're getting now, you're going to have some word of mouth, it's going to add a little bit, but is it going to double? Is it going to 10x? Like, how do you just pull on that dial? So tell me maybe a little bit of how you structured go-to-market over the last 12 months.
Yeah, so all throughout 2024, it was founder-led sales. So I was doing sales. We ended the year at like 1.5 or so million in ARR. At that point, I knew our customer really well because I'd just done so many sales processes. Like if you booked a demo with us, you'd be booking a demo with me.
Yeah, what was maybe, so they would go on inbound, book a demo, and then you'd talk to them and get the close? That was kind of the funnel?
Exactly. And we'd run like a 1-week trial process for larger teams. And we did a ton of variations of that, like from like a 4-week trial to like a 3-day trial. And then we settled on the 1-week period.
And $50 a month, that was the price point?
At that point, we had increased it a bit. I think we were around like $100 a month or so.
Was there a full self-serve or did you have to do a demo?
Yes. In fact, the far majority of revenue came through full self-serve.
Okay.
Or of new revenue, but then over time, the kind of expansions and some of the larger customers ended up becoming an increasing share of our customer base. Today, it's the majority of our revenue.
So to be clear, when you're saying you're doing demos, some people were booking demos, you were doing those, but also some people were just signing up inbound and using the product.
Exactly right. In fact, many times people would book a demo after they already purchased their first monthly plan. So they'd be like, I bought this or wanted to get started right away. I think we have a pretty fast time to value. So from when you test out the product to when you see the value in it, it's pretty quick. Our trial is also pretty limited. And so at that point, it's kind of a purchase decision or the book a demo decision.
How big of a deal has time to value been? This is a KPI I keep hearing about, and I just more and more I'm like, this is one of the biggest things you can focus on in the early stage. I'm curious what your impression has been.
Yeah, I think time to value is like a requirement for doing a successful self-serve motion. For us, what that means in the product is that today when you sign up to the product, we put you right into a search. And so the first thing you see is like the prompting interface to put together your first search. And then it's literally just one click from there, like clicking run search to start seeing profile results. And oftentimes that's already the value for our customers. They quickly got to people they might want to hire. And it can go as fast as like 5 seconds. And that is really important for us because the attention spans are short post sign up. Like, what is the value we're actually delivering? And oftentimes software has like this initial empty state where there's nothing in there. There's no value that exists because you just created the software. And so we focus a lot on just making that time to seeing your first search results be really quick.
How do you make that? Is that search personalized at all, or is it just like a template search that you have loaded out?
It's an open prompt field, but we have some pre-filled searches that you can just click, or you can write your own. Usually when people sign up, they sign up because they have a search in mind. Like they know they want to hire for someone. And so the by far most common flow is the user just describes that in like one sentence. And our example searches are also intentionally short so that the user feels they're also fine with just writing an initial short prompt to get started rather than something super comprehensive.
Perfect. I took it completely off tangent because we were talking about go-to-market and I took you down the time to value road.
No, the two go hand in hand. So like the time to value has remained quick. As the customer gets larger and it's a larger organization one selling to, time to value alone is not enough to get a conversion. And there's like a lot more depth behind it too. And so I think that was kind of a learning journey we've gone on this year in 2025. Our first account executive joined right at the start of the year in January. And today we have 6 account executives on the team. They do exactly what I did, and they do it better, which is, getting to know the customer, seeing what their needs are, and then running a 1-week trial process with them. We're still very trial heavy. I think there's a lot of software that says like no trials or like it's just a purchase process. That's, I think, where the time to value still comes in. Like we're able to show strong results in that 1-week trial period and is kind of still a core part of our selling motion. And now the difference is that because we work with larger teams and there's more users, some of the contract values are accordingly higher too.
And you've grown what, like 3x this year?
This year, closer to 10x.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've crossed 10 million top line.
Oh, yeah. We announced, so 10 million we announced as part of our Series A announcement.
That's an insane year. So tell me a bit about the top of funnel, because you're mainly inbound, like you can add A's and all that stuff. Obviously, it's critical, but that's post somebody signing up or post somebody booking a demo. How do you just 10x your top of funnel on something like inbound like this?
Yeah. So word of mouth has continued to grow. I don't know if it's actually grown 10x, but it's continued to grow pretty aggressively. And then at some point, we just started layering in other channels. And so Vicky on our marketing team joined us in February, and she's been like just experimenting and driving so many different things. Everything from pretty large scale paid ads to we did our first billboard campaign recently. So here in San Francisco, a lot of billboards on Juicebox. We host events. We go to the different recruiting conferences. And so we've been testing all these different channels just to layer on and see what works and then double down on the ones that do work for us. And some of the ones that we found work are, one, organic content. And so we post a good amount of content as a company, be that like posts that I post on my LinkedIn, but also other team members and on the company page. 2, we get very involved in like recruiter communities. And so we might sponsor them. We might invite them to events. We might co-host events with them. And that's really just to amplify the word of mouth. And then 3rd, paid ads. And paid ads serve 2 purposes. 1, kind of acquiring net new customers, but then 2, engaging people who tried out our free trial but never converted yet. And so retargeting is also a big component of that for us.
I think if I asked like 10 founders who they would want to lead their Series A, Sequoia would have to be on the top of just about everybody's list. How did the Series A with Sequoia happen? Can you share that story?
Yeah, it happened fairly quickly. So David Kahn, who's now on our board, reached out to us in summer, and we got an intro through an angel investor in Juicebox and a power user of Juicebox who connected us. And then we knew we kind of wanted to raise an A, but we weren't sure on timing yet. And so we kind of took the conversation just with like a getting to know each other and
it wasn't part of like a process. It was just like
there was no process. And so then after a couple conversations within a 1-week period, it was clear that they were leaning in. And so we decided, okay, now if we want to continue these conversations, we should make it a process because we don't want to kind of go down the road with just one firm and then who knows what the outcome is. And so we had spent that like initial week with just Sequoia. And then in the second week, we kind of started creating like a deck and making an actual Series A process. And that's where then we spoke with a targeted number of other firms that we had built relationships with in the past and that we'd also be excited to work with. But we kind of knew that if Sequoia would work out, that's where we wanted to go. And then fortunately, we got the term sheet the following Monday and then kind of agreed on those terms shortly thereafter.
Tell me, like, when did you raise your seed round?
We raised a seed in the fall of 2024, so like October. And at the time, it was just Ashan, me, and our founding engineer, so the three of us.
How big was the seed?
It was 5 million.
How much of it did you really use between then and raising your A?
Almost nothing. I think like 750K, 500K or so. So we did not burn much during the time. And a lot of that was just due to the revenue growth and the fact that we have pretty high margins, or we have no like huge cost structure. And so I think that allowed us to be fairly efficient as a business.
There's many different philosophies on raising money. You decided to raise 30 million even though you hadn't spent the 5. What's your thinking for why that makes sense?
Yeah, I think part of it is like a kind of each firm will have like ownership that they want to get to. And so part of it is a trade-off of like, if you want a sufficiently high valuation, that also means the round has to be of a certain size. And so I think that's one element of it. And then the second is, when the company is in a position of strength, it can make sense to kind of build that capital. And then in an ideal case, you never need the capital, but a startup journey is never like, just up and to the right. And so it can also be good to have a bit of a buffer in case things are at any point not up and to the right.
Perfect. Well, listen, let me stop it there and I'll ask the 3 questions we always end on. The first one is, when was the moment when you felt like you'd found true product market fit?
I think when we signed the AI lab as a customer in like mid 2024, and they expanded shortly thereafter. Maybe the expansion was actually when we knew we had product market fit, because we knew we could like sell to kind of one of the, I'd say, hardest to like please customers. And then 2, they actually liked the product and expanded with us shortly thereafter.
Was there ever a time on the flip side where you thought things might just fail?
Yes. After we launched, we had that viral People GPT video launch in like 2023. We had all these users, but then 3 weeks later, they were all unhappy or like churning and like wanted a refund, et cetera. And like that was really rough because we had just kind of come off this high of like, everyone is interested in the product, or we had our message market fit, but then we felt like we couldn't deliver on it. I think that was kind of a rough time.
And then what would be like your number one piece of advice for an early stage founder that's trying to find product market fit today?
Keeping the team super lean and then being honest with yourself. Nowadays is one of our core values is intellectual honesty. And I think early on when we kind of wanted things to work one way, we would lie to ourselves a bit. And I think we always ended up regretting that, or like making a decision to reverse that later on. And so trying to be honest with oneself and like trusting your gut instinct of like, this doesn't feel quite right.
Awesome. Well, David, thanks so much for jumping on the show, man. It's been great having you.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, what an episode. You're probably in awe. You're in absolute shock. You're like, that helped me so much. So guess what? Now it's your turn to help someone else. Share the episode in the WhatsApp group you have with founders. Share it on that Slack channel. Send it to your founder friends and help them out. Trust me, they will love you for it.